Guild Wars 2 differs from many other top MMOs, but one of the most fundamental ways it differs from other MMOs is the way it approaches traits, gears and stats. Very few modern MMOs give you the option to either build super glass cannon or with more survivability. Guild Wars has so many different stat combinations that it makes it quite daunting for new players to understand how to build to do content. This is where newer players or players coming from other MMOs like World of Warcraft and the like have a hard time understanding that you can't just go onto a dungeon or a raid build website, get a build, put it on and do all of your open world and events on this build, as it will make it a lot tougher.
Now we're gonna have to fight Dagda, and I'm already like almost dead from like I have no idea what. I've just got like no survivability and I don't understand why.
Now with all that being said, there are a few amazing builds that do great at raiding, strikes, fractals and the open world. So if you are lazy like me and you want a multi-purpose build, here's my top 10 builds for all content in Guild Wars. Jump scare. Two things. One, I'm streaming on Twitch. It'd be awesome to hang out. Could be playing some Guild Wars, maybe some other game, you know, just hanging out, having a good time. Two, all the builds in this guide are not mine. They're the property of Snowcrows and all the awesome people on their Discords and their team that work on these things. So I'm going to put a link in the description, a link to each of their builds. Some of them are not meta, some of them are just like effective or beginner friendly. So have a look at them, you know, things like that. I highly recommend it. And also if you are one of those guys that's like more in the upper echelon of raiding and want to take your raiding from like 80% bench to like, you know, set in benchmark, have a look at their guides and stuff like that. Absolutely great stuff. Anyway, on with the video. Number 10, the Power Quickness Scrapper. I picked the Quickness Scrapper over the normal Scrapper because I find that the access to quickness, especially outside of a group, is going to up your DPS a lot. Having access to so many boons, super speed, healing, damage reduction, CC, and so much utility, this class is so effective everywhere. The downsides to this class, in my opinion, especially for open world, is no ranged weapon, meaning you can't really kite a boss and do damage. You've got to face him head on, and especially if you're trying to solo a champion, that can be quite devastating. Also, not having access to all other sorts of boons like Alacrity means that your quickness uptime and other boons will suffer substantially. That way, you'll have to play a little bit with your Boon Duration if you want to get more utility. However, this class will still do an extremely good job in most content. And number 9, the Power Chronomancer. I picked the Power Chronomancer over the Power Virtuoso because I really do prefer the illusions as well as phantasms of the Chronomancer. Having these allows you to try and pull aggro off of yourself every now and then, although they do not last very long against most champion mobs. Having access to so much range, so much CC, active blocks, focus pulls and the like make this such a strong class in the open world. As well, this does really well in raiding and in fractals because of the crowd control that you have, as well as massive DPS. The downside to this is that Chronomancer is fairly hard to play, especially the fact that your illusions and phantasms don't hold aggro very long, and you are fairly squishy, especially with using your heal skill as part of your DPS rotation. And number 8, the Condition Alacrity Specter or the Condition Specter. I haven't really decided in my brain which one I think is better in this position. I do like the idea of giving out boons and having boons out in the open world, but both these builds do incredibly well. Having access to all of those CCs, bleeds, poisons, vulnerability, you're very self-sufficient, you've got a lot of range DPS, massive mobility, lots of healing, and it's also quite easy to pick up. This class is probably one of the easier ones for newer players and does so well in raiding and fractals. The only downsides to this is, I think, getting rich list gear might be a bit of a bugger, as well having all the resource management of the thief. But other than that, this build is so good and will serve you really well in all content. And number 7, the Condition Quick Firebrand. I think it outpips the normal Firebrand for the spot due to the fact that it has access to so much quickness quite easily. I do think that having quickness out in open world makes a build just slightly better, because as soon as you group up, you're just helping out so many people. Yes, you won't have Alacrity, which maybe makes you struggle. Keep 100% boon uptime, but Firebrands have never really struggled too much. Having access to a lot of CC, healing, Condi cleanse, so much utility with projectile reflex, you know, it's just got so much to give. It's also got really good damage, especially if you've got the old Scepter build, makes you so hard to take down on the open world. Condition Quickness Firebrand is still strong in most raid encounters, strikes, and really solid in fractals, especially if you have a heal brand variation. This allows you to basically do all content, and yeah, having access to stability and Aegis as a DPS class makes you so good. The downsides to Firebrand: if you are running the new build without the Scepter, you don't have access to as much range, obviously a bit of a sad one. Your skills rely a lot on your page management, so if you do need access to Conzi Cleanse or stability, but you've used it for other things like DPS, you might struggle a little bit out in open world. You also lose a lot of DPS when targets move because you are dropping fire fields. That means when you're trying to fight a boss in the open world and you drop something down for him to stand in and he moves out of it, you lose substantial DPS. Also, getting Richless gear is fairly tough, making this quite a hard class to gear. And in number 6, the Power Vindicator. I've picked the Power Vindicator over the Power Herald because of just so much high damage, especially in raiding and fractals, making this class very sought after. Big burst, tons of cleave, and just extremely high damage overall. You can, however, play the Power Herald here if you wanted to, because the access to boons is really good. The downsides to the Power Vindicator is the fact that it just doesn't have range, no CC to low CC. And basically, if you're running out of your dodges, using them for DPS, you might struggle trying to kill a champion out in open world. However, if you are doing more group and meta events out in the open world, you're going to be looked after. You're going to be doing crazy DPS. And number 5, the Quick Power Herald. Also pip in both the Vindicator and the Power Herald in my opinion. The Power Quick Herald is so strong. Being able to give quickness, especially out in open world, a massive gain because it's going to up your DPS more than if you play a pure power build. Having good mobility, loads of CC, and just every single boon. You've got regen, prot, might, fury, super speed. You have just so much to give, as well as obviously quickness. You have access to stability, a boon rip. You've got so many pulls and pushes. It is so fun to play this class, especially if you want to bring out the center for some projectile destruction. You're so useful in all scenarios. The only downsides to this class: no range DPS. And in 4th place, Condition Renegade. Pip in Alacrity Condition Renegade. I think pure Condition Renegade is better for the open world. Having access to the short bow is massive. This allows you to kite enemies, massive AoE damage, piercing shots on your short bow, having access to some knockback with your short bow 5, as well as having Kala. Being able to throw down the Dark Razor and have so many stuns will basically AoE immobilize a massive group out in open world. This class does extremely well in raiding fractals because of its condition damage, the fact that it's got such a high ramp up, good sustained damage, and quite a high benchmark in general. The only downsides to this build in my opinion is resource management. Being able to make sure that you have enough energy for your healing skills, for your ice rages, for your dark razors, being able to boon rip at the right time, heal at the right time, and being locked into a legend sometimes can be quite devastating when you're out in open world and all of a sudden you need to deal with a mechanic. And now for the top 3. In 3rd place, Condition Virtuoso. One of my favorite classes to play in most active content, Radiant Strikes, open world. This class is so good. Extremely high DPS that's not as boon reliant as you think it is. Lots of CC because you have access to so many daggers from all the bleed effects, your F3 skills, all of your other utility skills from your weapons. You basically can crowd control just as well as the Power Virtuoso and the Power Chronomancer. Substantial range DPS with a lot of bleed effects, meaning that you can kite quite easily. Very easy to play and very good sustained damage overall. Like I said, this class is amazing, not just at raids and strikes, but in the open world. Having those dagger skills with all those piercing abilities means you can also AoE really easily. The downsides to this class, I don't know, maybe just dagger management and maybe just being locked behind a weapon. Maybe when you need a focus pull you're in the wrong set. Other than that, I don't really see a negative to this build. Perhaps the food used in the precision condition damage food might be more expensive, and maybe it's not very easy to get Rampage's gear, but other than that, this class is phenomenal in most content. And in second place, it has to go to the Condition Druid. The Condition Druid is an extremely strong build, one of the highest damage dealers at the moment in Raiding and Fractals, extremely fun to play. However, I want to preference this by saying the Condition Druid build that I'm kind of referring to is the slightly older one with the short bow. This means that you can basically have a lot of range DPS on targets, you can solo almost most things, and having your pet out, allowing it to take aggro, allows you to just control fights on them in the open world so much easier. Being able to do damage from range and not taking damage yourself, but also having access to so much immobilization, CC through the spike trap, as well as just loads of bleed damage, and having access to 2 sets of pets and being able to swap between them. So when one pet dies, you can bring out the next pet, and this allows you to just not have to take damage yourself. You got access to a lot of healing and support through your celestial avatar, and you've got so much other utility that you can bring to the table. The downsides are, if you're running the newest build without the short bow, you don't have range DPS, and this makes you quite susceptible to getting thrashed by some champions. Also, if both of your pets are downed, that means that all of the ads will come for you, and this can be quite hard to deal with, especially if you do not have the ranged weapons. And also, a lot of your DPS and also your rotation is going to be found in your celestial avatar. So going into celestial avatar at the wrong times kind of can cost your DPS or your utility, especially if you need a Condi cleanse yourself. So this means that the number one spot has to go then to the Conditioned Soul Beast. The Conditioned Soul Beast is probably one of my favorite builds. I used to play this exclusively on open world up until the Conditioned Druid was a thing, and I will play this if I do solo rather than just do open world content. The Conditioned Soul Beast is strong for a number of reasons. One, all rangers have some of the best downed abilities. Having a stun on your down 2 and also a pet revive on your down 3 means that you're very hard to kill in general. Having the ability to absorb your pet and basically gain extra stats like toughness as well as other stats make you harder to kill. But also, by absorbing your pet and releasing it again, you full heal the pet, which means you basically have a continuous tank that just can't die. So you can send your pets out to tank a boss or whatever, and when it does die eventually, you just absorb it and release it and it will go back to tanking, meaning that you've just got an infinite tank in front of you. Easy to learn, very easy to play, even if you don't have the 2 daggers attached. This is such a strong class. Having the shortbow 3 with the evade frames, the stun on shortbow 5, the mob on shortbow 4 mean that you can control mobs so easily. Having access to pierce damage, especially if you do have light on your feet traded, mean that you have strong AoE and good control over most situations. As well, having the healing out of poison damage means that you are very hard to kill out in the open world. This build shines not just in Raiding and Fractals, but also in most open world content. The downsides to the Conditioned Soul Beast are basically that you're not going to do as much damage as the Conditioned Druid. The Conditioned Druid does extremely high DPS. And that's it. That's my opinion on the top 10 best raid classes to open world. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope this helps you, especially some of the newer players that are looking for a class that they can use for most content and not have to try and worry about getting other gear sets to make it work. These classes you can build almost exactly how it is on the websites, and when you take them out in open world, they are so strong, survivable, and do a lot of damage and can control a lot of open world content. I thank you, and I have been your guide. Please like the video and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't enjoy it, thank you for watching right to the end, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.